sounds like an awful lot of work, which means it's an awful lot of man hours, which means it's going to be expensive.
That's true.
Is this part of your evolution of a franchise lender?
Well, I would say that I agree with everything Jeff said, but on the other hand, if you're going to do all this due diligence and do 5 loans, it may not be worthwhile in terms of cost and benefit. So especially with a smaller franchisor that's newer, A, you need to do more due diligence, and B, you don't know ultimately how many loans you're going to get out of it. So it just may not be as big a program as you thought.
That's exactly so are you recommending, if you're a community bank in El Paso, Texas, and Jiffy Lube walks in off the street, to do one Jiffy Lube concept doesn't make sense?
No, I'm not saying that. I think to do a local loan, Bob, it does make sense, but back to the old model of CIT or a national lending platform, I don't think it makes a lot of sense to underwrite the franchisor and go to that depths. If it's a new franchisor and they say, hey, we're going to go into 50 states, we need a lender to follow us. We need a lender to help us. You just have to be careful, because you can do a lot of due diligence on it. You can spend a lot of time, and ultimately the program may not be productive if you want to roll it out in multi-state pattern.
Let me ask you this question. Then how do you treat, we're just having reams and reams of paper. I'm envisioning files growing by inches, and all of a sudden a mom and pop shows up, and they want to do something, and they're mom and pop. Tell me now how you view mom and pop versus a franchise application.
We would look at a mom and pop. As a matter of fact, to be honest with you, Bob, it might be less due diligence to look at a mom and pop. There's no UFOC to look at. I mean, there's no class action lawsuits to look at and litigation pending. There's no chat rooms and websites
blaming them
and that kind of thing. So ultimately, you don't have to look at where they get their supply. Do they have supply agreements with, are they a captive of the franchisor? Is the franchisor going to make them buy their supplies through them, and what's their margin? You're just looking at a straight deal with no royalties. So if it were in my backyard and it were non-franchised, I would take a look at it, because I'm going to get credit in terms of community lending. Doing that loan as a community bank, I would make the effort to try to do it.
Interesting. But let me play devil's advocate, but one of the reasons why we like franchise operations is we know down to the penny how these things operate, and I know that if I sell something at $8.33 and I want to bump the rate by 10%, how that's going to impact my sales to the bottom line, because I can benchmark over 200 systems. Everything's behind them: legal, accounting, HR. But mom and pop, are they sophisticated in 2011 to be able to pull it off? There's an interesting comment that was raised last year at the National Franchise Restaurant Show, and any of you can comment on it. It said there will be no casual dining, i.e. the Applebee's $10 meals, owned by mom and pop. He said they just won't be able to compete with the franchises. So let me address you first, Bob. What do you think about that, and how would you respond?
I disagree. I mean, I know my local market. I know that's not true. But, I guess I'd frame it, Bob, that I would not do a non-franchise. If I'm in Providence, Rhode Island, I'm not going to go to, say, Portland, Oregon, and do, a non-franchise. I mean, years ago, if it were franchise and it were on the West Coast, I'd take a look at it because of those, the cookie-cutter aspect to it. But I don't necessarily agree with that, because in our area we have a lot of non-franchises. I've heard and I've seen in other markets where the independents can't compete. But my point is, that's you got to look at it by locale, one size doesn't fit all for that.